We've got upcoming low sulfur regulations, and they are coming on the 1st of January of 2020, and IMO has started this, and this is in order for the entire world to deal with the issue of climate change. The United Nations Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, has determined that all countries will contribute to the reduction of their emissions from their economies. So, and this would be approached sector by sector within each country. Typically transportation, typically energy production, agriculture, manufacturing, and all the subsectors of every economy. Now, the two subsectors that are left out of the in-country arrangement are the aviation subsector as well as the international maritime transportation subsector. Those two are to be governed by their international organization, and it's a simple reason that those emissions coming out of each one of the subsectors cannot be pinned down to any country. A typical example is a ship that leaves China with 18,000 containers may have a percentage going to South Africa, another percentage going to West Africa, and the balance of it going to 3 countries in Europe. Now, it will be difficult to apportion those emissions by that ship to each one of the countries. And for that reason, then it is important, and IMO and UNFCCC decided that is going to be the approach to international shipping. Now, IMO, in taking up that instruction from UNFCCC, needed to find a set of rules. And now IMO then has a climate reduction and emissions reduction strategy. The one part of it is you will design ships that contribute less to gas emissions, and in that respect we came up with regulations called Efficient Energy Design Index, where the ships being designed are designed to emit just the appropriate amount of emissions between the ship and the weight that the ship is supposed to transport. Then there is the whole issue of operation of that ship. To say that that ship, when it is designed, it will be operated in an efficient manner, whether it is ensuring that it is properly maintained so that the emissions reduction is achieved, properly painted such that there's very little resistance between the ship and the water underneath, and the like. Now, in terms of that, ships are required to keep a record book to say just how well they are doing in terms of their fuel consumption arising out of the savings, etc. Then there's the last bit. You've dealt with the ship, you've dealt with the ship design and the ship operation. Now then you deal with the fuel itself, because these emissions come from fuel. Now, in terms of the fuel use, it is to say that find those energy sources with low carbon impact to the atmosphere. That is where your LNG, liquefied natural gas, and all the low carbon, high energy types of fuels. And then there is an issue of dealing with the fuel as we know it, with impurities. And one such is sulfur. Now, then that is when we then arrived at IMO decision that you shall cap the sulfur content inside the fuel that is being used. Now, this has been a gradual progression. Up to about 2012, you were allowed to use fuels with a higher sulfur content, typically up to about 4.5%. From 2012 to 2020, that number reduced to 3.5%. From 2020 onwards, that number is reducing further to 0.5%. And that is where we are. But in implementing those regulations, there are a whole lot of things that we need to make sure that are in place. The fuel needs to be there. The ability to inspect for compliance needs to be there. The ability to test for the compliance of the fuel needs to be there. In case there is no fuel, there needs to be an arrangement that you use unqualifying fuel, but we have on board installed systems to make sure that you are able to clean the exhaust that's coming out of the combustion process. But once you do that, you've got an exhaust problem for that water. Where do you clean it? So you arrive at the whole issue of shore reception facilities in the ports, etc., etc. The purpose then of this conference, this workshop, is to say how ready is this country to implement these regulations, given everything that has to be in place, from the legislative instruments to the capacity of the people, to the capacity of the infrastructure in the port, to the economic impacts, which is what we need to offer. So the ultimate objective for the workshop then is to surface all these issues for discussion, as well as to make the government understand the impacts of the new regulations. We're hoping that at the end of tomorrow we shall have a roadmap to implementation, which roadmap will take into account all the input. We've got the energy providers in the country, we've got the Department of Energy and their stakeholders, we've got the cargo owners and their shippers, we've got the regulators that we are. Now we need one voice from a South African perspective to say, how do we implement this thing going forward?